Welcome to the South Downs National Park Dark Skies Festival. As a National Park Authority responsible for keeping the South Downs a special place, we think the star-studded skies overhead are as valuable as the beautiful rolling landscape of the Downs. In 2016, the South Downs National Park became the world's 13th International Dark Skies Reserve. And so each year we celebrate the night sky above us with a festival. Whether you are out on a night hike, stargazing or keeping warm at home, we hope you can join us to celebrate our storied stars and glorious galaxy. The following mini-podcast talks about the folklore of the night sky and includes the Greek myth of Belleraphon and the Chimera. The recommended listening age is 12+. For thousands of years we have looked to the stars to show us our destiny. Many of us consult our star signs in order to determine our year, week, or even how the day will turn out. Zodiac was a term used by the Greeks to describe the oval-shaped path of the Earth around the Sun. This elliptical path is a belt in the sky, and the word itself can be translated as circle of animals. As many of you will know, there are 12 signs in total: Aries, the ram; Taurus, the bull; Gemini, twins, which are two stars also known as Castor and Pollux; Cancer, a crab; Leo, the lion; Virgo, who's a woman; Libra, a set of scales; Scorpio, which is a scorpion; Sagittarius, a centaur; Capricorn, half goat, half fish; Aquarius, a water bearer; and Pisces, a fish. All these 12 signs can be seen as constellations within the sky and within the path the Earth takes around the Sun, so they will appear in the sky at different places at different times of the year, and each one has a month where it is most dominant. Whichever star constellation was dominant in the month that you were born, well then this is considered to be your star sign. The zodiac I'm describing is of course Western. There are other zodiacs though. There is the Hindu zodiac, the Chinese zodiac, and throughout the world cultures have looked to the sky to divine their future. As well as portents and predictions, the night sky also holds plenty of folklore. In weather lore, that's the prediction of weather using folk beliefs, stars are thought to be able to predict rain. It is thought that if the sky is clear, but the constellation of Cancer the crab is not clearly discernible, then, regardless of the absence of clouds, rain is definitely on its way. Sailors have often looked to the stars for guidance, and if they observed shooting stars, they would be able to predict the direction of the wind depending on the direction that the star was travelling in. Of course, there were and are more reliable ways of working out which direction you need to go in when you're at sea. The North Star, for example, has always been a pretty reliable way of navigating, and a glimpse of this star was considered good luck for sailors close to home. Shooting stars were not viewed with an ooh or an ah. Instead, they were seen as signifying death and disaster, and a comet that was seen and recorded in the year 1066 was thought to be the reason for the Great Plague. One of the brightest stars in our sky is Sirius the Dog Star. This star makes up part of the constellation Canis Major. Sirius is one of Orion's hunting dogs, and even if you're not familiar with the stars of the Greek myths, you may recognise Sirius's name from the popular franchise Harry Potter. Sirius Black was a shape-shifting wizard in J.K. Rowling's stories of Harry Potter, and he shape-shifted into a black dog. Canis Major has appeared in stories for centuries, though. In the summer, there is a period of time that the Romans referred to as dog days. These were days when the bright star of Sirius would appear on the horizon just before sunrise. When this star appeared in this particular position, both the Greeks and the Romans would consider this to be the beginning of the hottest days of summer. Sirius, of course, also has the Greek myth of Orion attached to him. In this story, Orion decided that he would take on the hunter Artemis, and his pride led to his death at the tail of a scorpion. The gods were in disagreement as to whether Orion should have died or not, and whilst Asclepius, the healer god, wished to bring Orion back, Zeus did not want Asclepius giving the human immortal life, and so he struck a compromise with him and put Orion in the stars. To keep Orion company, his hunting dogs were placed up there with him, one of these being Sirius. Another famous story from the stars is that of Callisto and Arcas, the Great Bear and the Little Bear, Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. The story goes that the Princess Callisto caught the eye of Zeus, angered Hera, Zeus's wife, and eventually Hera turned the princess into a bear. The princess had had a son, though, named Arcas, and Arcas grew into a fine bowman. One day he was out in the forests when he came upon a bear. Of course, this was his mother, but Arcas did not know this, and he raised his bow and arrow to shoot the bear. Zeus was watching, and he felt guilty that Hera had turned Callisto into a bear, and the last thing that he wanted was for Callisto to be killed by her son, and so he also changed Arcas into a bear. He then reached down from the sky, took hold of the two bears by their tails, and flung them up into the sky, so that they may be in the stars together forever. The winged horse Pegasus also lives in the stars. He is the half-brother of Belleraphon, and he assisted his brother in the defeat of the Chimera. It is this story that I would like to tell you next. There was once a prince of Corinth who had fallen on hard times. His name was Belleraphon. He was an honourable man, and he found himself in the court of King Proteus. There he sought sanctuary, and whilst Proteus could see that Belleraphon was a prince and a man of noble birth, Belleraphon would not allow Proteus to do him any favours, and instead he worked hard for Proteus and served him faithfully. Unfortunately for Belleraphon, Proteus's wife, Queen Antea, had taken a liking to him, for he was a handsome young man. She tried on many occasions to seduce him, but Belleraphon was not paying her any mind. Proteus had been good to him, and he was not about to sleep with his wife as payment, no matter how beautiful Antea was. And so it was that Belleraphon incurred the wrath of a woman scorned. Queen Antea went to King Proteus and accused Belleraphon of disloyalty. Proteus did not want to believe this. However, neither was he going to call his wife a liar. Reluctant to put Belleraphon to death, a man who had proven loyal up until this point and extremely useful in defending Proteus's kingdom, well, the king thought it best to send Belleraphon away to Queen Antea's father, King Iobates. Queen Antea handed Belleraphon a letter to take with him to her father, and unbeknownst to both Proteus and Belleraphon, this letter was essentially a death warrant for Belleraphon, as it asked King Iobates to put to death the bearer of the letter. When Belleraphon arrived in the palace of King Iobates, well, this king too had no wish to bloody his hands with the death of Belleraphon. He was well used to his daughter's manipulative ways, and he wondered whether the man who stood before him was indeed guilty of the crimes his daughter had accused him of. So he decided to find another way around it. Iobates decided to set Belleraphon to such a task that there was no way he would return from it alive, and he had just the task in mind. And so it was that King Iobates set about telling his story to Belleraphon. He told him that the letter he had before him was from King Proteus, and that it said that Belleraphon was the only man to free Iobates from his enemies, and so he had sent him to complete the task. Iobates tells Belleraphon of how the king of Caria threatens their land despite Iobates' mighty armies. This king is able to do so because he has a chimera. This chimera is a terrible monster that has the head of a lion, the body of a goat, and the tail of a huge hissing serpent. The lion's head breathes out fire so that no one can get anywhere near it, and King Iobates believes that the king of Caria is amassing a great army under the cover of the chimera and will soon attack Iobates' kingdom. Bellerophon does not even need to be asked directly to kill the chimera. For him, this is family, the family of the king and queen who took him in. Iobates is taken aback with the speed at which Bellerophon agrees to take on this task, but there is no turning back now. The stage has been set, and Iobates thinks, well, either way, I'll be rid of the chimera or rid of an inconvenient house guest. Eager to begin his task, Bellerophon starts to ask questions about the chimera, whether it has any weaknesses perhaps, where exactly it's located, and whether it always breathes fire. He clearly has no idea what he is up against, and Iobates does have a small amount of pity for Bellerophon, so he suggests to him that he may be able to vanquish the chimera if he is able to harness the winged horse Pegasus. Again, thinking that there is no way that Bellerophon will actually achieve this. But what Iobates does not know is that Bellerophon is the half-brother of Pegasus, and one of the only mortals that would ever be able to ride this winged horse. However, Bellerophon still needed a golden bridle in order to harness Pegasus and ride him. Some say that this journey took him to the temple of Athena, who gifted him the golden bridle, and others say that Bellerophon sought the help of a seer, and this seer counselled Bellerophon in how to tame the winged horse. Either way, the story goes that Bellerophon found himself in possession of a golden bridle, and on the banks of a crystal-clear river that sprung from snow-capped mountain peaks. He waited there for many days, for he knew that Pegasus would have to come down from the sky to drink from this stream, and eventually Pegasus did appear. Through stealth and wit, Bellerophon was able to creep up on Pegasus and throw the bridle over his neck. Before Pegasus could fly off, as Bellerophon knew Pegasus would, he leapt up on the horse's back, and what ensued was, well, a sort of bizarre bucking bronco across the night sky. But Bellerophon stayed on, and he spoke to Pegasus with kind words and told him that he was his brother and that he wished him no harm. He told him of how he desperately needed Pegasus's help. In time the horse grew calm and listened to the words of Bellerophon. He told Pegasus of his promise to King Iobates, and Pegasus knew of the Chimera and where to find it, and took Bellerophon straight to the site of the fire-breathing beast. Looking down on this monstrosity, Bellerophon was beginning to think that his task was actually impossible. Yet he had come so far. He brought Pegasus around in a circle high above the Chimera, high enough so that the smoke and the flames did not reach them, and he decided what to do. Bellerophon was an excellent marksman, and he knew if he could get a clear shot and the arrow flew true, well, he could slay this three-headed demon. And so it was that Bellerophon drew back his bow and fired it towards the Chimera. Each hit reached its mark, but every arrow he fired fell, bouncing on the ground, useless against the Chimera's impenetrable skin. He knew not how he was going to defeat this creature without getting closer, and if he got any closer, well, that was potentially the death of both him and Pegasus, and he did not want that. And then he had a thought. He turned Pegasus around and flew to the nearest village, where he found a blacksmith. He begged the blacksmith to help him with his quest, and the blacksmith had indeed heard of this fearsome foe. Bellerophon asked him to make him an arrow of lead. The blacksmith did not have the heart to tell Bellerophon that no one had ever returned from an attempt to kill the Chimera. So he obliged. And he made the arrow for Bellerophon, so that he may at least try. Bellerophon and Pegasus returned to the gates of the city of Chimera, where the Chimera still stood breathing out its fiery plumes. Bellerophon steered Pegasus up and up into the sky as they had before, flying higher and higher until they were directly above the Chimera, but out of reach of its fire. He drew back the bow, this time with the lead arrow in it. Instead of aiming at the hide of the Chimera, Bellerophon aimed the arrow straight into the gaping maw of the lion's head. It found its target, and at first the creature was not at all slowed down by the arrow, but soon the flames turned to black smoke and the lion's jaws gaped. What Bellerophon had hoped for had come to pass. As soon as the lead hit the heat that was within the Chimera, well, it had started to melt, and the Chimera began to choke as the molten lead slid down its throat and into its belly. The liquid lead wrapped itself around its vital organs, solidifying them in an iron-fast grip. The Chimera finally fell dead and defeated, and Bellerophon returned to the palace of King Iobates. However, he was not welcomed with open arms, as Iobates fully expected him to be dead, as the letter had instructed him to do. Instead, Bellerophon found soldiers and guards trying to kill him. Bellerophon was enraged, given the service he had just done King Iobates, and with the bodies of the king's soldiers strewn around him, he demanded an explanation from the king. Iobates tells him of the letter and how he cannot believe it, for the man who stands before him is clearly a loyal man. He begs Bellerophon's forgiveness and offers him his daughter's hand in marriage by way of compensation. And thus ends this chapter of Bellerophon's adventures. But, as with all of the great Greek myths, there is always a sequel. Thank you for listening to this mini-podcast exploring the stories and folklore of the skies. To find out more about the dark skies of the South Downs and the Dark Skies Festival, please visit the South Downs National Park website. We do hope to see you again soon.